summary of all of your accomplishments. Everything you've ever done, all on one piece of paper. The concept seems a little bit overwhelming. And maybe there's a critic inside of you saying, is it really necessary in today's day and age? Do I have to have a great resume? Deep breath, because on today's edition of the interview presented by New Horizons, we're going to learn about what has to be on your resume, what are recruiters and hiring managers looking for, and we'll pass along some of those tips and tricks so your resume can be exactly what it needs to be in 2021 and beyond. I'm not going to give you all the information. I got an expert in tow, thank goodness. Merri Beckfield, Executive Program Director for the Mars Returnship Program, is going to be our guest today on the interview presented by New Horizons Computer Learning Center. I'm your host, Pat Miller, the Idea Coach. Now, this show is a one-on-one interview between Merri and myself. However, you're joining us, which is super cool. That means you can pop into the chat and share your questions, comments, and sarcastic remarks, and we will incorporate them into our conversation today. If you're serious about getting a new gig, don't forget about the thousands of training courses New Horizons can offer you to up-level your skills. From an intro to computers you can take right on your mobile device, to Windows training, to immersive technology courses to get you prepped in the growing fields of cloud computing, cybersecurity, and more. New Horizons is making computer training simple and fun so you can go out there and get a big old great job with big bucks. If you want to learn more about it, check out careerdevelopmentsolutions.com. Today's episode is sponsored by Forward Careers. Looking to launch a new career or change careers but don't know where to start? Check out Forward Careers, the preferred source for career exploration, education, and skill training, and employment connections for every person and business. Forward Careers is a team of workforce professionals that specialize in providing high quality, effective, and accessible career services to individuals seeking to improve their employment potential in demand-driven and high-growth professions. To learn more, visit them online at forwardcareers.org. Funding is provided by the Department of Labor Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act H-1B Tech Hire Grant, Department of Corrections Windows to Work, and Children and Families Independent Living. So let's get on with it, shall we? Let's talk about resumes and what we need to know. Let's welcome our guest, Merri Beckfield. Merri, it is great to see you. How is Tuesday treating you so far?
Tuesday is great, and it's great to be here. Thank you for having me on, Pat.
It's my pleasure. So we want to make sure that everyone gets up to speed on resumes and do we still need them and how do we make them work and all of those sorts of questions. But we want to learn a little bit more about you. Tell us about what you've done in your career and what you're doing now with the Mars program.
Certainly. So I worked in technology in IT for over 30 years, working in industry. And in 2019, I officially retired, and I am the Executive Program Director for the Mars Returnship Program, which is a program to help folks who've taken a career break in technology get back into the workforce. So a way for me to give back to the field that was so good to me through my career. So that's loving it.
That's a wonderful way to spend retirement, some spare times, stay engaged and make a difference. Kudos for you. So let's just ask the big question, because I'm sure there are folks that are watching that are like, resumes? Really? Do we still need to have a resume?
We do.
Ah.
I know. Yes, in today's day and age, it's still very important. That is one of the primary ways for you to get connected to potential employers. It's the way for you to tell your story to them.
Is that the way we should think about it? That it's not a biography of every, burger flipping job we've ever had in our life. It's basically a story we're trying to craft to earn a position with a company?
Yep. Because if you think about it from the hiring manager's perspective, they want to know who you are, why you want to work for them, and why you want that role, and what you've either done or what you know that is pertinent to the role.
Okay. I guess that changes things a little bit as to why we need them. What if you don't have one? I mean, if you're trying to apply for a job right now, where do you start if you don't have a resume at the moment?
There's a couple of ways to get started. One of the easiest ones is if you just go out on the internet and Google resume template, resume examples, start looking at them. You can put one together, jot down on a piece of paper, like your contact information, information about your past roles. What have you accomplished? What value would you bring to the table? Look at those examples on the internet, put one together yourself in Microsoft Word type format. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, there are resume services out there as well where you can hire somebody to help you with it.
You talked about some of the basics. Let's think about it from the hiring manager's position, because
Mhm.
the only reason why we do one of these silly things is so we can get a job. So someone's going to look at it and evaluate it. So you mentioned some of the basics, contact information and stuff like that, things that we've done. But are there any additional things that we have to remember to put on there? This gets into the tips and tricks that maybe somebody forgets to put this on their resume.
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, make sure you have your name, your email, your phone number, your contact information right at the top. Believe it or not, I've actually seen resumes that have had good content, but they're missing a name, or they have the name, but I have no way to get in contact with the individual. So that doesn't serve you well, right?
No.
um, so beyond that, typically you'll put a summary at the top, maybe 2 or 3 bullets, just who you are, your brand. If you're in the technology field, it's good to put a skills section where you just list what technology you know. And then you get into the section where you want to include what prior work experience you have that's relevant. And think about it. Anything can be relevant, right? It doesn't have to be a specific similar job you've done. Any job you do, you're picking up transferable skills that the employer may be very interested in knowing what you did and what you accomplished in that role.
And let's dig into that, because
Mhm.
someone who lists on their resume, shift manager at Taco Bell, oh, that won't apply to an IT career. Well, if you think about the transferable skills of managing people and following recipes and whatever, making change, just how do we pull out those transferable skills that someone might want to see?
I think you need to think about what is it that you did that is applicable to any job. So your example of the shift manager at Taco Bell, absolutely. You've managed people, you've dealt with customers, you've dealt with difficult situations. So you need to think a little bit about what it is you did in that role. One of my favorite stories is in the book by General Colin Powell. It's My American Journey, I believe is the name of
Mhm.
it. And he had a job sweeping the floor at a Pepsi bottling plant. And in that book, he talks about how much he learned there and how relevant that role was to who he became. So there are things you do in any job um, that you want to make sure you highlight. Don't undersell yourself. Don't minimize those jobs you've had in the past because you've learned something, you added value. Call that out.
And I think that's a really good reminder for folks that are looking to get a job, because when you're applying someplace, essentially you're trying to not be rejected. You want someone to say, "You're valuable and come work with us." And sometimes when you're in that position, maybe we're kind of beat up and we're not feeling
Yeah.
that great about ourselves. So, any words of advice on how to muster up that courage to toot our own horn? Because if we don't toot it, nobody else is going to, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would say the way that I do it sometimes is I will just ask a friend or a former coworker, like, hey, I'm really having trouble thinking about, what I did here that was valuable. Let me just tell you about my role. And they sometimes can hear through either your telling or their observation of you. They may give you some suggestions and tips. You can
That's a good
also,
idea.
yeah, that's one way to do it. That's the easiest way I have found. Another way is just to go out again. You can Google, look on the internet, look for resumes that are similar to your background and see how other people have worded those things. Because that might cause you to think. You don't want to borrow it or steal it, but you want to use it to come up with your own thoughts about what you accomplished and what you contributed.
Yeah, for sure. I know this isn't your problem, but I do just need to vent for a second on behalf of job seekers. How come we have to
Sure.
type in our entire resume into the freaking computer form and then attach our resume as well? Like, I don't know who Big Resume is, but we need to have a word with them, because that is BS.
Yeah, it's a lot of extra work for a lot of people. I think it gets into the topic of bots. I don't know if you want to go there next.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So um, I think it's probably not a secret to most of the listeners that when you submit your resume online to a role, most places and most employers are using software, bots, if you will, to
Mhm.
scan that. The challenge is it doesn't always scan it accurately or appropriately. So those forms are super helpful to capture consistent information from an employer perspective, make sure everybody's providing all the key information that they need, because it A, might not be on your resume in the format they need, and B, the software might not actually capture it correctly. And there are some tips on how to make your resume bot friendly.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, first of all, you do want to use keywords. So, every time you submit a resume to a role, you want to make sure to tailor it a bit and customize it to highlight both to the bot and any person that reads it some of the keywords that you have that they are looking for. And that can be both technical and non-technical. So for example, if I am a software developer, instead of just saying, as a software developer, I programmed for 6 years, that's very non-specific. You want to put in keywords. So if you know Java or you know JavaScript, you want to make sure those words, those specific words are in there if that is something that employer is looking for. It makes it easier for the bot to match it. It makes it easier if a person is scanning or skimming your resume. That's point one. But don't limit it to just the technical skills. Think about your transferable skills. So if you
Mhm.
managed or you led or you completed or you maintained, sometimes recruiters will put those keywords in, or sometimes managers will be scanning for those. So keywords is number one. Number two is keep it simple. The bots or the software that scans resumes does not do well with columns, doesn't do well with underlining, doesn't do well with graphics. So it may seem not very exciting looking at your resume when you simplify it, but it's the most effective way to convey your information and have it go through the bot versus getting rejected or having data be missing. And then finally, and I just learned this recently, some of the software that's used cannot handle PDFs because it
Oh,
would have
come
to
on.
unconvert that format. So best bet is if you're submitting it online, submit it in a Word document format. Obviously, if you're emailing it to a manager, you can certainly put it in a PDF. But if you're submitting it online, try to keep it Microsoft Word.
All right. So let me just get this straight. I
Yeah,
don't have
sorry.
a job. I have to
Yep.
tell my life story in a Word document.
Yep.
Then I have to go to the website and type all that information in. And then the Word document that I submit to the computer program that I just typed all my information into has to be dumbed down so a robot can read it. Am I getting this right?
You got it. You
Oh,
got
that
it.
just makes me want to jump off a building. Like seriously,
Yeah.
how does it have to be this hard? Like I just it feels like unfair almost to the job seeker. And I'm not even looking for a job and I'm frustrated.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I have done in the past when I've been looking for a job is I will just have a like a cheat sheet of all my pertinent information that's typically
Mm,
asked on forms. So I don't have to rethink it every time. That's one kind of suggestion I could make for the listeners.
yeah, and I think not having to rethink it is probably good because if we had to think about what we were doing, it would be very depressing. If you're just joining us, welcome. This is the interview presented by New Horizons. We're talking about resume tips and tricks. So if you're thinking about getting a new position, we'd love to have you be a part of the conversation. Drop a question into the chat. We'll work it into the conversation. Our guest is Merri Beckfield, Executive Program Manager for Mars Returnship Program. So you talked about making our resume bot friendly, which
Mhm.
again makes my head want to explode. But uh, what about the little things? Because now let's talk about the hiring manager. You get past the bot, they
Mhm.
think you have some experience that might translate. Do the little things matter anymore? Grammar, spelling, punctuation? I mean, is that overlooked now? Because if you look online, people aren't using grammar, punctuation, spelling.
Yeah.
It's all kind of casual. Is a resume still a very formal, sacred place of having everything perfect?
Yes. I'll just
Oh,
keep it as simple it is. It's
check.
important. Yeah. It's important. And if you think about it nowadays with all of the assistance with grammar that you can get online, Microsoft flags the stuff. If you're doing it in Word, it'll
Sure.
flag poor grammar. Pay attention to those things, make sure it's correct. And I would say from a hiring manager's perspective, over hiring for many, many years, one of the things that I think people need to keep in mind is that hiring managers, once you get to them and they're looking at your resume, they're skimming, they're not reading it like a book. So make it as easy as possible. You want the most important stuff toward the top. People spend, and this is really going to probably frustrate you. I will tell people hiring managers probably spend 30 seconds looking at a resume.
Oh, come
Yes.
on.
And I saw something from someone the other day that said it's only 6 seconds. So you don't
Come
want,
on.
yeah, you don't want that short time frame to be them going, oh my God, they misspelled that, right? You want them to be like, oh, looks like they got the skills I want. I'm going to put them in the pile, get a meeting set up, because it's all about just getting to that next step where you can actually have the dialogue.
I'm telling you. I think
Am
Lily's
I
tuned
ruining your
in.
Tuesday?
No. I think we're hitting on something that's really real right now. Lily, thanks for the comment. Really enjoying this discussion. To be honest, I'd rather write a cover letter than fill in my resume information 2 times. And that is so true. That's the
Right.
behavior, going to the website, entering all your information, and then attaching your resume. Lily, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you doing so. Yeah, and I don't know why. Maybe this is just like flashbacks to when I was looking for work and how frustrating it was to try and do all of this. Because on one hand, especially today, you have every company in America saying no one wants to work and I can't find people. And then they make this process so onerous and
Yeah.
so just frustrating that it just seriously, this has to be simplified somehow. And I don't even know why I'm like, you're getting all of my venom today, but it's like, this is so frustrating.
Yeah, and I can control how every company captures data. I would say I think there's 2 different purposes, right? The resume typically will ultimately end up in a hiring manager's hand. We don't necessarily see the information that's keyed on that form. That's
Yeah.
really for the system that's tracking the candidates from a HR perspective. So there's 2 different purposes and 2 different outcomes. And yeah, I'll just go back to my advice from when I was seeking jobs. And it is a full-time job to look for a
Mhm.
job. It's hard
Mhm.
work. I'm not going to minimize that, is just try to find ways to make it as simple for yourself as possible. One, keeping the resume simple so it's bot friendly. It's also easier for you to maintain.
Sure.
Having that cheat sheet when you go to key stuff in, that'll make it simpler and faster.
What about the temptation that exists when building a resume that maybe you led a project when you contributed to it, or you opened a new store when in reality you were just the manager? Like, no one wants to be dishonest, but people want to get to the top of their range about their accomplishments. Would you recommend underselling, overselling? Because this gets into that. How confident can you be when you talk about your accomplishments?
So, first, I think you want to be confident and you want to use action words. So, you want to make sure you show that you added value. So, maintained, contributed is a good word. I would avoid overselling so much that it becomes untruthful, because people
Hmm.
will check. Um, they will ask you about that in the interview. And if you can't speak to it appropriately, that'll be a red flag to the hiring manager.
Yeah.
So I think that the fine line is don't undersell yourself. The problem that most people have is they undersell themselves. They're like, well, I just did that. It wasn't that important. It's like, it was important. Otherwise, someone wouldn't have hired you to do it, right? Or if you're doing volunteer work, it is important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the organization that you're helping. So make sure not to undersell yourself. And then you definitely have to have done it.
Hmm.
It's okay if you did it and you didn't do a great job at it, still claim it. And if somebody asks you about it, you can talk about what you learned from it.
That's true. I've done interviews before with people who said, I did something and I was terrible at it, but here's what I learned. In fact, some of the best answers of why did you get fired from that job ended up making me feel more endeared to the person that actually
Yeah.
learned from the experience. We're talking with Merri Beckfield and we're talking about resume tips and tricks. If you have a question, drop it in the chat. We'd love to include you in the conversation. But we only have a few moments left, so do it quick and we'll get it in. I want to go to another expression of our work history that has a completely different set of rules and regs. Can we touch on LinkedIn for a minute? And is it
Sure.
important as you do your resume and start applying to have your LinkedIn up and polished with the same fervor that you will a resume?
Yes, absolutely. Um, and For a couple of reasons. First of all, employers do look at the resume, but then they will also look at your LinkedIn, and you want them to be consistent. Because if they're not consistent, and I mean consistent at a high level, right?
Mhm.
They tell the same story, you have the same work history. The resume is the more formal of the two. LinkedIn is more social, right? But they need to be consistent. Otherwise, as a hiring manager, if I look at your resume and then I go find you on LinkedIn and your work history is completely different, then I'm like, which one is right? Are you just telling me what I want to hear on the resume? So make sure they're consistent. They also have two different purposes. So the resume's purpose is specific to job hunting, job seeking. LinkedIn's purpose is to help you build your social network, which ultimately then may help you with your career, either with guidance, advice from others, people who know you, and then hear of a job opportunity that you may be great at. But it is very important to have both. The other thing is they differ in one other important aspect. On resumes, at least in the US, you never include a photo. It's just kind of taboo in this country.
Wait. Rewind. You're saying on a resume in the US, never include a photo.
Correct.
And I'm not that I don't know why that hit me, but like that just seems the declarative of never. Like, is
Well,
it just? And I know that maybe it might matter person to person, but that is a. I didn't know that was a thing.
yeah, at least in the typical traditional business roles that are out there, you wouldn't. Now, maybe if you're an actor or an actress, perhaps, or a model,
Sure.
but for the types of roles we're typically talking about here, you just don't include a photo on a resume. It's just not
Mhm.
something that's done in this country. And I think it goes back to, um, where we're trying to be non-discriminatory. It's just been a kind of a tradition for quite a
Okay.
while in the US
Sure.
that photos are not included on the resume. Now, what's interesting, because LinkedIn is social, it's really important to have a photo out there.
Mhm.
So I wanted to call that out because it could be a question that people have. It's like, well, why do I have it here and not over here?
And that's a good question that maybe doesn't have an answer other than that just is the way that it is.
The
They're two
convention.
different
It is a
platforms.
convention. Yeah, two different purposes.
All right. One of my final questions talks about how clear we need to be on the role we're applying for. Like, especially in IT, if you want this particular seat on this particular software stack or this particular role, should we only be applying on jobs that, like, do you see what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
exactly qualified for? Or can we say, I've done the job that's one below, but I think I'm ready for the one above? Do you see what I mean?
I do. I do. So let me answer that question first. So, absolutely, if you feel ready for a role, apply for it. There's an interesting fact that, or I shouldn't say fact, but anecdote that I've heard, that a lot of job seekers will apply for something where they meet 50% of the requirements. But other people feel like they have to meet 100%. You
Mhm.
don't, right? I, as a hiring manager, have put my job description out there. It is my Christmas wish list to find somebody who meets all those requirements, but you never do, right? And so they're going to hire when you have a certain amount of the skills and if you show the potential to gain those other skills. So don't sell yourself short. Don't knock yourself out of it just by not applying to begin with. You for sure won't get the job then. But if you see something where you're 50% qualified and you're like, well, it might be a stretch, go ahead and apply for it. Absolutely. I would
And
definitely do that.
but for what it's
Um,
worth, I've also heard that women undersell their accomplishments and will not
I do.
apply on a job that they think they can grow into. And that is on average. That's not
Mhm.
casting aspersions at women and how they think about what they do. But I've heard women coaches that work with women specifically, that women will undersell their actual ability and potential more often than when men will. Men will be more
Correct.
comfortable to say, "Oh, I can do that." And women
Yeah.
need to encourage themselves and believe that they can grow into a role as well.
Yep, absolutely. And that really was to my point. Just don't knock yourself out of the competition.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think the second point around knowing about that job, people will tell you, and I 100% agree from my own experience, is that one of the number one reasons, or the number one reason, maybe it's number two, but hiring managers quite often will discount a candidate who doesn't either appear interested in the job in the interview or doesn't convey that that's the job they want on the resume. So if I see a resume and it's not clear to me that this person is interested in, to your point, being a full stack developer or software developer, if it looks like they've had a variety of IT jobs and maybe they're just shopping around and they'll take whatever, I want somebody who's passionate about being a software development. That's what I'm looking for. And so most hiring managers are looking for somebody who has the passion for the job, even if they're not 100% qualified. They want that focus and energy because that person will work hard versus somebody else who's like, well, I just need a job. I was maybe doing some testing over here, and maybe I did some system administration here. I'm just going to apply to a bunch of different things. It's like, but what's your passion? You need to know yourself.
Yeah. It's been a great discussion. Merri Beckfield, Executive Program Director for the Mars Returnship Program. Thanks again for coming on the show. We really appreciate you helping out some folks today.
Thank you.
Man, that was fun. All right. So if you are living in that area right now where you got to have a resume, you got to apply on a job, and maybe you need to up level your skills a little bit, that's what New Horizons is here for. You can learn more on how they can help you grow your ability to get a great career at careerdevelopmentsolutions.com. Their training staff is standing by right now. If you go to careerdevelopmentsolutions.com and pop into the chat, like an actual non-robot, like a person will reply to you right away. They'll talk you through how you can land the training you need to get your next great career. Careerdevelopmentsolutions.com. Thanks to New Horizons for their partnership today and our sponsorship with Forward Careers. I'm Pat Miller, the Idea Coach. I got to go because I have to take my devastatingly handsome headshot off of my resume, and we'll be ready for the interview next month in early January. Happy New Year and happy holidays to you.